I mean, this is new for everybody. I know you guys have really, as a group, done your due diligence to try to figure out a game plan. How difficult was this process just to come up with the decisions on the dates to delay the bigger schools and, of course, stay on schedule for 4A and below?
It was a very difficult process that involved a lot of discussion. But, as you see the decision unfold, you can tell our line of thinking. Texas is such a large state, and schools are facing such a variety of challenges depending on where they're geographically located. So there's no perfect way to split them. We split them as best we could, trying to get the conferences who have the most schools facing the most challenges to delay and give them a little more time to get things figured out, while at the same time giving them the same season. It's just placed on the calendar. And then those more rural areas of the state, again, it's not a perfect dichotomy, but generally the more rural areas of the state who feel like they're ready to go, letting them get going and get started on schedule.
So the schedule is in place now. Is it still a situation where you guys are keeping an eye on how things are developing with the virus and keeping an eye on numbers across the state? Could this potentially change if numbers change, or how do you guys look at it?
Well, I think any group that puts out a plan right now, given the context that we find ourselves working in, has to be nimble and ready to pivot when necessary. And so obviously we have plans and backups to those plans. But they're all based on hypothetical situations right now. Until we have a real challenge in front of us where we know all of the facts of that challenge, we don't know exactly how to put the finishing touches on any of those plans. But we're ready to pivot if necessary.
What response have you gotten from coaches? They've gotten word. What are you hearing from them?
So it has been varied. By and large, the response has been very positive. I think there was a growing concern amongst the coaching community that we might not have sports seasons this fall, as they've seen other decisions released across the country. So I think there's genuine excitement at the possibility of getting to compete, while at the same time, UIL is all about trying to give you as level of a playing field as we possibly can. And this pandemic just doesn't really provide any options for us in terms of solutions where all schools could start at the same time and play the same number of games. That solution is just not available. So what we tried to find is one that lets those who are ready, by and large, to get going, and those who aren't can wait and get going when they can. It was really important to us for football, for example, to stay with the 11-week regular season schedule. Understanding that schools may not be able to play a full 10 games, but they may need all 11 of those weeks to get creative in their scheduling to play as many games as possible. We really want to put an emphasis on district competition and at least let schools have an opportunity to compete at that level. So having that full 11 weeks available to them to create those schedules based on their local context was a really critical part of the plan.
So from a football standpoint, things were pushed back about a month, correct? And you're looking at the date you could start practicing is going to be when?
We released September 7th, so on Labor Day, and we understand that not all schools will be able to start on that date. And that's for the 5A, 6A schools. For 4A schools and below, they can start August 3rd. Again, understanding that some are under local orders and won't be able to start until later. But in analyzing the schools who were largely impacted by those local orders, we found in 4A and below, those schools were largely aggregated into UIL districts that are relatively small, 6 teams or fewer. So, a 5-game district schedule in football, usually a 10-game district schedule in volleyball, will allow them to play in a complete district schedule. So that could happen later in the playing time that we have available on the calendar. So they might not get all the non-district games in or any non-district games in, but we're hoping we've given them the best chance at least getting their district schedules completed.
So we're looking at, for football, we're looking at a potentially full schedule for a lot of teams, hopefully, if it plays out. It's going to carry into January. Talk a little bit about that. Like the last time it happened was about 100 years ago, if I'm correct on that. So you're updating the record, the history books here. Talk about the fact that y'all had that window and that opportunity to still get a season in, even though you're taking it into the new year.
Well, so it caused us as a staff to really stretch our way of thinking, because our football event, for example, having all of those championship games at the same location in the same week has been such a successful event. that's just really a Texas treasure now, having the opportunity to see all those games. And so having those on 2 different weeks is a different way of thinking. But again, looking from a UIL lens, who those schools are and how they operate. In 5A, 6A, you have multiple sport athletes. There's no question about it. But sports don't share athletes at nearly the same level as they do in Conference 2A, Conference 3A, for example, where the starting quarterback might also be the starting point guard and the shortstop on the baseball team. You have some of that in 5A, 6A. So I'm in no way suggesting that it's completely eliminated, but it is drastically reduced at the 5A, 6A level. So being able to stretch that season out, give them the full football season, which will create some more overlap for some of the other sports seasons, makes that more tenable, given that it's only the largest schools doing that. In those small schools that do have students who compete in multiple activities, who are also the leading role in the one-act play and the drum major for the marching band, they can still do those things at the small school level.
Lastly, are you guys glad this is behind you at least, and hopefully there's no other roadblocks ahead? But I know this has been a lot of work put into this.
Yeah, I think to say that this is behind us is a little hopeful, which I appreciate, because we would love to think that we've got a decision out and we're able to go and everything will fall as we release today. Hopefully that happens, but we also recognize that conditions change every day. So if we need to make some modifications, we will. Like everybody in Texas, it's been a grind on our staff coming up with different plans and trying to find a way to give our kids these experiences. So we're going to continue to monitor the situation and stay heavily engaged with our schools and taking feedback so that we're ready to pivot if necessary.
Jamey, appreciate the time, man. Appreciate you carving out a few minutes with us.